one thing on the agenda, and that is the approval of the interfund reimbursement agreement. I think everybody's seen the one prior. This just has the numbers added in. I'll turn it over to the superintendent. Do you want to just talk briefly what happened this morning?
So, you know, we had previously signed an MOU between the city and the school district, which really talked about our share of the funding process. But this interfund reimbursement agreement really spells out with the actual numbers how we're going to repay this money, the actual debt service for this, and the function of it. But before we move on to that, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you, Mr. Lawton, and thank the city for stepping up and helping us. You know, we know that we're in this partnership together, and as the schools succeed, so does the city. But we know what a big undertaking this was for the city of Germantown, and I personally can't thank you enough, and I'm sure the board echoes that sentiment, that this is something historic for the city of Germantown that we are doing, and it is going to make our schools exceptional. So thank you.
Well, the feeling's mutual. If I can speak on behalf of the mayor and the board, I can assure you they feel the same way. Great partnership, great relationship, and the district's willingness to step up and assist in the project, because you knew and know where we are in terms of what we can and can't do. That's not to say things won't change down the road in terms of larger and more significant projects, but trying to address your primary needs right now, we feel good about this.
And I think everybody on the board, when we all came on, one of our main goals was to eliminate the portables at Riverdale, and this will make it happen.
So will you give us a recap of what happened this morning? Just
Sure.
we got to be there and see what happened. So can you just fill in our board on
Let me
the
interview.
process?
You all met Lauren. Lauren Lowe is with Public Financial Management, Inc. They're the city's financial advisors. They've been with PFM since probably mid-80s.
Mm-hmm.
And they do an outstanding job working with the city, particularly when it comes time for us to issue debt. Nick is here with PFM as well. So with that introduction, Lauren, if you would walk through what happened this morning and the numbers, how they've changed in terms of what's in the agreement and the attachment.
Sure, and as Mr. Manuel knows, this has actually been months and months of undertaking for the school board and for the city, and all kind of came to fruition today. We'll actually close on March 7th, so just so you know, funds haven't been received. That occurs actually on March 7th. But today, and in fact leading up to today, last week, our office was involved in reaching out to banks and making sure they understood the city's transaction, and then, you know, because they're really just seeing the city, not the GMSD portion. And we spoke to 20 to 30 banks on Thursday, got some feedback from them, and then today we actually opened the bid process, and it is a true competitive bid process in which they can submit bids starting about 10:15, 10:20 up until 10:30. It's a very small window of time. They made us sweat until about 10:20, 10:25. I think we got the first two, and the remainder came in right at 10:30. We ended up with 6 bids. And I'll just kind of run through these just so you have a frame of reference. FTN Financial Capital Markets won. Actually, it was out of their New York office, but as we all know, they have a huge presence in Tennessee and in the Memphis area, as well as Atlanta. Raymond James and Associates was the cover bid right behind them. That's the former Morgan Keegan, as you know, also a large presence in the Tennessee area. Piper Jaffray, Robert W. Baird, SunTrust Robinson Humphrey, and Hutchison Shockey Early. So 6 bids were received. The lowest bid, or it's referred to in the market as the highest price, but it's the lowest cost, it's on a true interest cost, was FTN Financial Capital Markets. They bought both pieces of debt. So the city was also selling a Series A bonds for their capital needs and a refunding, and then Series B was related to the GMSD or the educational needs. So they bought both pieces. We offered about $18 million into the market. They bought both of that, all or none. And the cost of capital for 30 years for that whole piece of debt was a $311. So we awarded to them, and then we stepped back, and that was kind of when we said our goodbyes for that moment, and have been working to finalize numbers between us, the attorneys, and FTN, as well as there's a third-party verification agent, which was more about Series A and the refunding, but still a step in the process. So now what you have in front of you are the final numbers that we agreed to among the participants today. So you'll have in front of you Exhibit A. It's 3 pages. I wish it wasn't 3 pages, but to be honest, there's a lot of information here, all which is very important. I'll kind of quickly run through this. The first page of this is really how we broke the allocation among what we refer to as sources and uses, meaning what is the funds going to be used for, and then allocating the debt that's going to, we had to borrow for these projects or these uses, how we allocate that debt amongst the two entities. So if you'll see here, we have the GMSD portion, and this is $4 million for the Riverdale project. That's the portion that will be covered by the school district. And then $8 million for the city, and I want to pause there because I know that we initially started this whole process with the city covering $7 million. I think through review of them, they're actually comfortable with affordability up to $8, 7 of which will be for Riverdale, correct?
Right, and so we talked about the city. This is another area where they talked about how can they help out the district. We talked about the roof at Dogwood or other capital projects with that funding. We highlighted that, and the board had previously highlighted that as being the next priority for the district with capital improvements.
And so then you'll see that there's an allocation among the large capital projects that were funded through this bond issue, and then the individual pieces below it were also the cost of issuance. The cost of issuance account for, we have 2 rating agencies that rate this piece of debt, the legal fees, the financial advisor fees, and the largest piece is the actual bank's compensation, the FTN Financial Capital Markets. That was the only piece that we actually saw a pretty significant movement from what we were estimating. I think we estimated it at $6 a bond, and it came in at like $10 a bond. So that was one piece that we saw a pretty significant movement from our review. The other cost of issuance we have nailed down, several weeks ago. And then this additional proceeds, I'll just cover it because it's a small amount, but still out of full disclosure. Bonds are sold in $5,000 denominations, so we have to round up, and that's the $500 to round us up to the next $5,000 denomination. So that total proceeds of $12,196,352.30, and then there's just a further allocation of the GMSD proceeds. Please note of that $4,065,450. $4 million will be received by the district. You'll receive actually all 11, but $4 million is tied to the project. The $65,000 is for cost related to the transaction. The next 2 pages break down the payments, the semi-annual payments that the city is responsible for to bondholders, but through this interfund agreement, we have the GMSD column and the city column, and we really do that just so that we all kind of have full disclosure and every number ticks and ties to what needs to be paid to a bondholder. So you'll see that schedule is on the 2nd page and 3rd page and carries through to the final maturity, which is, and I should have said this on the front end, I'm sorry, that the Series B bonds are structured over 30 years. It's principal and interest payments every year, so it's mortgage style. It's not backloaded or front loaded, and it's level debt service on an annual basis. This is a schedule for semi-annual payments, so 2 payments a year. So I'll stop and allow you all to ask myself questions, Nick or Patrick or whomever.
One other comment, if you would, on the front page of the actual reimbursement agreement, page 1. The draft that you received last week had an amount under the 3rd whereas. We had in brackets language something to the effect that said this amount will be determined.
It's a bond sale or something like that.
Yeah. And so, Lauren, if you would explain the $10,220,000 and how the city is able to leverage that for additional money. It says $10,220,000. How do we give you $11 million? There's
Right.
a premium in the bond.
Sure, and so just not to spend too much time on it, but just bonds are priced different than a lot of other investments, in fact, most investments. They can be either priced at a premium or a discount, and in this case, they're priced at a premium. So the investors actually gave us more than $1 today to get $1 in the future. So the proceeds are, so the par amount borrowed is $10,220,000, but the total proceeds, if you go back to that Exhibit A that we were referring to, that first page, the proceeds are actually or matched to this number, the $12,196,352. So par, and the reason we have to refer to as par amount and why it's important in here is because state statute and all the authorizing resolutions that were adopted by this board talks about par amount, not about proceeds. So we need to make sure we tie back to that reference point. So, but there is the projects will be funded in its full amounts at 11 million, and that's what this agreement references, so just know that 10 million is just a reference to the loan amount, but there's proceeds coming in excess of that to get to your full amount.
Right, and we don't talk about the additional funds that we might use for the roof project or boilers or whatever else it might be used for with the district's FY17 needs. So that's not incorporated in this document. We're strictly talking about the dollars coming forward to you and then what the district would be expected to reimburse. And just to be clear, the reason, we're here, 20 minutes before the Board of Mayor and Alderman meet is all the things that happened this afternoon, but truly the district needs to act on this agreement before the Board of Mayor and Alderman do, because if this isn't executed, then we don't move forward with the Series 2016 B bond issue, or maybe all of it, for that matter. Yes.
So I saw this when I came in tonight, so, the repayment schedule is based on 12 million, but the agreement is 11?
No, the repayment schedule for GMSD is based on 4. They're only gonna repay the 4. In fact, we also adjusted their proportional share of the cost of issuance to reflect that the city was gonna cover instead of 7, 8.
Right.
So that percentage was also updated.
How much did, are we in questions?
Oh, sure.
How much, the repayment doesn't seem to me to have changed by much. So the debt service, 214 in 2017, 218. Are those numbers real close to the schedule we were working with before?
And I'm not sure what schedule you looked at, but I did go back and check, and it was literally a, $350 difference, $400 difference, $1,000, things
So it's
of that.
very, very close to.
We had sent out a schedule with the agreement
I got a
a
schedule
week ago.
Friday from
Or
Yeah, that's the one.
Ms. Supermine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
But we didn't know exactly until this morning.
Correct, those are just based off our estimates, based on current market conditions as we knew them, and I think we actually did it maybe Thursday, but nonetheless, it was the one Friday that I referred to when I was comparing before I came here.
So the 3.11% is real close to our guess.
Yes, I actually on Tuesday had updated for the Financial Advisory Commission meeting of the city, and we had it at a 3.03. And then we actually updated it further for this draft to share with the attorneys, and we accounted for we lost some basis points in the market at the end of last week.
Other questions?
Any questions?
Paragraph 4 talks about disbursements and specifically limited to the improvements, which I think are defined on the first page as the Riverdale expansion.
Right.
So when we get into the kind of bonus $1 million, how will that be? Are we gonna need to come to the city and say, here's what we'd like to do with that? How's that, what's gonna govern the disbursement of those funds?
Those will be escrowed as well with the city, and we don't have it, because there's not a reimbursement of those funds back to the city, we don't have that, but it'll be handled in a similar fashion, Ken. So whatever those dollars are, we will disperse them probably in a very similar manner to what's identified.
And the structure that we really talked about and with the disbursements in 4 was really predicated on what the city had to do to justify their bond in case they get audited. So it's their documentation process. So my guess is it would be very similar to what we did with Shelby County Schools with our project, about how we would submit an invoice and they would pay us, and then we show them what it was used for. So.
Right, and we identify here that when I talk with my folks in finance and accounts payable, how quickly can we turn something around? If Mr. Manuel or Mr. Cathy gives me an invoice on Monday, can I pay them on Friday? And the answer is yes.
Yeah, so, and maybe it shouldn't change anything for today, shouldn't be any issue with the activities of today, but will we have to amend this at a later date to cover disbursements for expenditures outside improvements, outside the Riverdale project?
I don't see another agreement, because certainly not a reimbursement, because you're not reimbursing that additional $1 million, but we will need to have some understanding. And again, probably very similar to what's in section 4 on how we will disperse money to the district for whatever that project is.
Madam Chair, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion so that we can continue the conversation. I'd like to move to accept the interfund reimbursement agreement between GMSD and the City of Germantown.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
I had, one more question, if that's all right.
We'll
Um,
defer to discussion.
Can these bonds be repaid early? Are they callable?
There's a
I think that's the right word.
Yes, that's
Amended
correct.
language. Go ahead.
Yes, they were sold with a 10-year par call, and so par call, excuse me, so that was built into this agreement, that we all recognize that 10-year par call window is that we owe the interest through that date of June 1, 2026. But then after that, it's callable at any time with, it's 30 days notice to a bondholder. We built in 45 here because once we were notified by GMSD that they wanted to prepay, we actually would have to get on board with a paying agent and escrow agent to notify them and notify the market. So we allowed for a 15-day cushion so that we can prepay them at any point after that 10-year call. Yes, so they are called. That was a long-winded answer, I'm sorry, but yes, they are.
Any more questions, Mr. Hurd? Okay. Roll call?
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Hoover?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Manuel, if I could, we can use what I have here as an original for signatures. I'd like to be able to take this in 12 minutes to the board
Yes.
meeting. And when this item comes up for discussion, be able to tell the mayor and the board that the school board met earlier this afternoon and did execute their side of the agreement. So this is the signature page, and I'll slide that your way for you and I think
Ms. Fisher.
Ms. Fisher.
And Ms. Owen, yes. And finally, I would encourage if y'all could, hang around a little bit tonight, when the board acts on this. It is,
Number 12.
there's a number of consent items, and then the other items will go fast, but I think, item 12, we'll get to item 12, I think, pretty quickly. So if I could encourage y'all to stay, and you're welcome to address the board. As Mr. Manuel said at the beginning, this is I don't know how many other districts are doing this or working this well together. I'm sure they are, but this is monumental. And I think hearing from you all, if you want to say something to the board, I think it would be appropriate.
We're adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.